Imagine this. You join a powerful new global movement. You feel like you finally belong, only to be told you're not really one of them, unless you adopt these ancient foreign rituals. Well, that was the exact crisis facing the very first generation of non-Jewish Christians. And the decision they came to, it would literally define their faith for the next 2,000 years. So it all boiled down to this one single explosive question that threatened to just tear the early church apart. Is faith alone enough? Was believing the message all it took to be saved? Or was there more? And look, this wasn't just some small theological squabble. For these new believers, this was a full-blown identity crisis that struck at the very heart of their message. Okay, so the spark that lit this whole firestorm, it happened in a city called Antioch. As the source material tells us, some visitors from Judea showed up with a message that just shook the whole community. They basically said, hey, your faith, it's not enough. To truly be saved, you have to follow the law of Moses, and that starts with circumcision. This one teaching set off a chain reaction. It sparked a journey all the way to Jerusalem, right to the heart of the faith. It led to this high-stakes council where, honestly, the entire future of the movement was hanging in the balance. And it all culminated in a verdict that would be sent out to all the churches. So all the leaders, they get together for this formal council, and the source tells us there was much disputing. Now, you got to understand, this wasn't some calm academic discussion. No way. This was a passionate theological wrestling match with absolutely everything on the line. As this debate heated up, you could basically hear four different arguments, four different voices, if you will. First, you had the messengers of law, arguing for tradition, for the rules. But then they were countered by powerful personal experience, the messengers of the Spirit and of power, who were saying, hold on, God is clearly already working among these non-Jews. And then there was a fourth voice, the messengers of the prophets who pointed to Scripture. The question was, which voice was going to win? At the end of the day, it all boiled down to this. On one side, you had the argument for faith plus works, the belief that to be saved, you needed to follow a specific list of religious laws. And on the other side, you had the argument for faith alone, the belief that God's grace is a free gift, something confirmed by what he was doing, not by human rituals. So the debate was at a complete stalemate. You had tradition versus powerful personal testimony. How do you even decide something like that? Well, that's when James, the leader of the Jerusalem church, stood up to speak, and his word turned out to be the decisive one. And this right here, this was the absolute turning point. James did something brilliant. He didn't just offer another opinion or tell another story. No, he completely shifted the conversation. He appealed to a source of authority that everyone in that room respected, the ancient Hebrew prophets. He quoted the prophet Amos, and you can just imagine the silence in the room as these words landed. James was showing them that what they were seeing, all these non-Jews seeking God, it wasn't some new, unexpected problem. It was actually part of God's ancient plan, something foretold centuries before. This was the key that unlocked the entire debate. This wasn't a modern crisis, it was the fulfillment of an ancient promise. The deadlock was completely broken because, as it turned out, the prophets had already settled the question. God's family was always meant to be global. With that incredible clarity from the prophets, the council was finally able to get on the same page. They drafted a formal letter to send back to Antioch and to all the other churches. And let me tell you, this wasn't just a memo. This was a declaration of freedom. And the verdict? It was decisive. The council came down firmly on the side of grace. The letter itself said they would lay no greater burden on the new believers. In other words, following all the requirements of the Mosaic Law was not necessary for salvation. Now, the letter did ask them to observe 4 things, but, and this is so important, these weren't rules to get you saved. They were more like practical, wise guidelines. They were meant to promote unity and respect between Jewish and non-Jewish believers who were now, sharing meals and doing life together. So let's do the final tally. After trusting in this message of grace through faith, how many additional religious burdens or rituals were required to be saved? The council's answer was a clear, unambiguous 0. So how did this groundbreaking verdict actually land? When the messengers got back to Antioch, the very place where this whole disruptive fight began, what was the reaction? You can imagine they were kind of holding their breath. Well, the result wasn't more division. It wasn't more arguments. It was relief. It was joy. The source says they rejoiced for the consolation, for the comfort and encouragement the letter brought.
the liberating message of grace was officially vindicated, and the church could finally move forward, together.
This ancient verdict still echoes thousands of years later. The council chose a path of grace over rules, of inclusion over exclusion. And it really leaves us with a question for our own time, doesn't it? In our communities, in our workplaces, in our world, where do we still see that same tension between what we believe and how we decide who belongs?